What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the altar again, and this time we got round two with Cristian Machado. Thank you so much for coming back on the show, man. We're here to talk Lions at the Gate. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, dude. It's been a long time.
I know. The last time
we spoke, it was still like COVID scary time.
Yeah, it was so long ago. I didn't even have a computer that could take Zoom at the time, so I was recording you on speakerphone with my shitty camcorder just to make it an audio interview.
Oh man, you're coming up. Now you have an actual computer.
Yep, and an altar.
I think last time we spoke, I had like an iPhone 8.
Wow.
I've upgraded finally to an iPhone 14, man. So we're good. Our connection should be better.
Back when phones had buttons, man. I remember those days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And headphone plugs.
Oh my God, that's before my time even. I'm not even 30. So but it's so awesome to have you here, man. This your new album with Lions at the Gate, The Excuses We Cannot Make, is a fantastic album. I was listening to it start to finish. It is absolutely amazing. For people who haven't heard the full album yet, though, with the couple singles that we heard, such as Bed of Nails, Scapegoat, Drain, and Find My Way, featuring Tatiana from Ginger, is that maybe a good representation of what all of The Excuses We Cannot Make is going to sound like, or is that just scratching the surface of what's to come?
There's a couple of songs on the album that people probably aren't going to expect. You know, there is one ballad that's more ballady than The Ledge. And there is another heavy song on there that's more like Find My Way. For the meantime, we've done like one ballad, one heavy song, and then mostly, you know, just straight up heavy, dynamic kind of songs that have a lot of different dynamics. But on the album, there's, you know, like one more ballad that might surprise people, one more heavy song. And then there are other really good songs that we've been playing live that we haven't released as a single, but in their own right could possibly be a single. So there's definitely good surprises left on the album. That's one thing I was kind of worried about is, we're going to release some of the singles and then everyone's going to know the good songs. But we were lucky in like almost every song is really, really good. So we realized, people will still enjoy it when they get the album, you know, because there's other songs we haven't heard and they're good. So usually bands release like their good songs and then they leave the fillers for no one to hear until they get the album. But I don't know. I can't really pinpoint any fillers because some of the songs left on the album are like some of my favorite songs, and we didn't release them as singles.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I love the track Digital Sea. I think that's a fantastic, you know, sort of deep cut on the album, if you will, which is a fantastic track. Ending with My Apology is a fantastic finale for the album, so there's a lot more to be discovered on it. Was there at all like a preconceived vision behind this? Because the last time I spoke to you, we were discussing Hollywoody Sycamore, which I know was meant to be like a slow, more acoustic album. Was there at all a vision behind the formation of Lions at the Gate in a way, or were you all kind of just like rolling the dice with the songwriting process?
There was very few guidelines that we wanted to follow and we set for ourselves. And the guidelines were very simple. We wanted to do something really different than what we had done in the other band. We didn't want to follow those guidelines. We wanted to do something that still sounded like us, but that stepped away from what it was that box kept putting us in the entire time. And the other thing was just to make music more dynamic and more appealing to the ear, you know, more ear candy, just more of the good stuff. Really is the more of the good stuff, and let's throw out the things that confine us. Like for example, we weren't necessarily confined by it, but for almost 20 years, we had to write. It had to be, you know, flamenco guitar, and I'm not knocking it. It was an idea that I originally came up with, you know, when we were in that other band. It was me that pushed, like, hey, we're Latino. We should push. Let's put flamenco guitar. Let's put this in it. But after so many albums of that, it really felt confining. You know, like we have to do that. And as a musician, it's like almost like your heart breaks because you want to do things differently. You know, and it's not to look down on what we've done, but you just want to feel like you're just doing something different. Like when I put out the acoustic album, it was like, well, this is different. This is why I'm going to do this, you know? So I think we wanted, the main thing, we wanted to do things differently.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't want to like have to put this into it. We wanted to put it into the music because we felt really good about it. And in our old band, we did for many years. And then after many, many years, it felt so confining to keep writing exactly like that all the time, you know?
Yeah.
So with the new band, we wanted to just feel free and just write things that we thought were cool.
Well, you know, as somebody who grew up listening to your voice pretty much and have been one of the many gateways into the genre, like, you know, I've always said that you've had many different usages of your voice and were able to express so much. Like, again, with Hollywoody Sycamore, to hear Die Alone and, you know, Blame It On Me, and then, you know, to hear the aggression. I was just wondering, with the many different usages of your voice, I mean, you've expressed a lot of emotions, but does different sides of your voice almost express different sides of who you personally are?
I think so. I think that, you know, when I'm searching for melody in my head, definitely anger is not the main driving point or resentment, you know. But perhaps in my screaming voice, there is a little bit more resentment, more looking backward. And I think that when I tend to search for melody, I always want to have hope. You know, I don't ever want to feel hopeless. And at least in my heart, I don't ever want to make our fans feel hopeless, you know? We already live in a world that sells hopelessness to everything, you know? The world is full of, we're all fucked up, everyone wants to kill you, you know, this, that. That I think in my melody, I always search for hope. But it all comes because of the hopelessness that I may have in screaming and parts where you are resentful or are, can't get past, perhaps is the right word. You know?
Well, because I think even though you know, I never considered you like a, you know, a hopelessness dealer in a way, or like, you know, a guy who is meant to, you know, just talk about darkness all the time. But I think the way you've always expressed your demons in your music has been inspirational. I still think Letting Go is one of the most relatable tracks in at least that I've heard in my personal life in a way. So like, but when you have to like address your own trials and tribulations, does that make the songwriting process maybe just as deteriorating as it can be cathartic? I've always said that sometimes artists can become victimized by their own product when darkness is an energy that's expressing it.
It's funny because when you're creating, you're searching so deeply. At least I am, you know, I don't write about other topics. I write about things I've experienced or things I've seen others experience. Not, you know, if I didn't witness it, I would write about it. But I think that when you're in the process of writing, you're searching so much and looking within so much, you're not able to step outside of your body and take in what it is that you're saying. When the album mixes start coming back is when most vocalists or writers start realizing, and then it is non-cathartic. Then it does hit you pretty hard, you know, in the spirit that what you are saying are things that caused a lot of pain. And it does bring back memories. You know? And I can't lie, even when we started getting mixes back of the songs, of Lions of the Gate, there were some songs that, you know, demolished my spirit for a moment. And I had to remind myself, and, you know, that this is all for the better good. This is all, you know, I'm talking about this because somebody else also needs this. It's not just me that needs this. And I think in the world, you know, we all need to share our experiences of struggle to let other people know life ain't perfect. You know, life is not perfect.
Yeah.
In this world, we're sold hopelessness or my life is perfect, you know, and there's this huge in-between area where there's suffering and accomplishment and planning, you know, and blood, sweat, and tears. And like one of the sayings goes, you know, the greatest inventions are 1% creativity and 99% hard work.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a big area in the middle that I think we forget about in the writing process. And then when you come back to actually just listen to it as a listener, not so much as a songwriter, that's when you're outside the box and listening to it. And you start to realize, you know, that the arrow is pointing at you.
you
and
mentioned
it does. And some singers may have a better shell, that doesn't crack as much when they hear it. But for me, it was tough because, I had gone through so many difficult things at the time we were writing the album that those things did, affect my spirit when I heard them. But it's all a learning process, Having to relive the things that might have hurt you is also part of letting them go.
Yeah, and you led me perfectly into the next question, actually, because you say you write about what you witness or like stuff that you've experienced. But do you believe that the inspiration, the creative energy that you write, do you believe inspiration really is something that could be sought out, or does it have to almost strike you in a way?
It has to strike you. You could seek inspiration by looking inward, but it's not something you could summon. Like inspiration, creativity, it either comes or it doesn't. You could do things that are inspired by something else, but would it be true inspiration that comes from the power that be, the mind, the universe, whatever you want to call it? Probably not, I've always been the kind of musician that, for lack of a better word, takes great pride in trying to not copy things, But I think in the end, we're all influenced by the music we like, and there's nothing we can really do about it. As a songwriter, these things, your mind regurgitates certain things, and your more favorite influences start to come out of your music. But it's definitely not something you can summon. You can't just I want to summon creativity, inspiration. You really have to be in the moment. That's why they say great songwriters, when they go through bad situations in their life or great winning moments in their life, they should sit down with a pen right away.
Yeah.
Because those are the moments where things will come up, and they'll come up naturally, and they'll be genuine, and they'll come from the nothing rather than from the mind that is trying to push whatever animal instinct may be in there, revenge, anger, also love, but it's not something you can summon, at least not with me. If I'm in the room with other people and I'm working with a really good producer, that's why the chemistry also is important in the studio. Because if you can't summon creativity at the moment, somebody else might need to say something that triggers it off.
Yeah.
And that's what chemistry is in the studio. When you work with a great producer, that's actually what you get. They know how to summon inspiration out of you just by certain things. I've never been the singer that, I have to feel good in the studio. I can't feel down and depressed. I have to feel good and be joking and things like that.
That's got to be hard though, because the studio is such a static and pressuring, confined environment. I remember talking with Christina Scabbia, and she mentioned this in another interview, but that being in the studio is she loves writing, she loves performing, but the recording is a no-no. That's the difficult part for her.
That's so crazy because she's a one taker, bro. That's crazy because, usually the singers that aren't happy about the studio, they're usually the ones that the producer's no, you have to do it 40 more times. You still don't have it. But the singers that can go in the studio and in 2, 3, 4 takes knock it out, whether it's by parts or singing the whole song, it doesn't matter. But if you're doing 2, 3 takes of something and knocking it out, you're usually this is easy. Yeah, this is why I do music. I'm in here for this,
Yeah.
Because everything else feels so going on stage, you have to change your clothes, you have to put on something. You can't go on stage with your pajamas. You could, but would you really want to?
Have you been to a hardcore show, man? You're from the East Coast.
And rightfully so. Anthrax back during the days of jams wore their pajamas on stage.
Dude, I was at the infamous Madball show at Tompkins Square Park, and most people weren't wearing anything. So
true.
Yeah.
But being in the studio, if you're in the studio with the right person, we worked with an amazing producer, Kyle, who really knew what buttons to push. And he knew that I had to be in a good mood to really create well, I might have told him that when we went into the studio, hey, I'm not the beat up guy, and I'll get better takes. My takes will get terrible if we start to go down this path of like, you know, we're not enjoying it anymore. Now the topics got serious. You know, when we were putting the lyrics together, it was super serious moments. But once we got to actually singing the parts, it wasn't like, you know, I need you to think like you were there. And it wasn't that. It was more like, let's focus on the tone, focus on the melody, the pitch, things like that, you know, the more technical things.
Yeah. The next question I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, actually, is just because this year marks 20 years of one of my all-time favorite albums, and that is Confession. I mean, I still think, like, after Hybrid Theory, I think that that is the best representation of what the whole quote-unquote nu metal movement was about. I put that above Follow the Leader. I put that above Iowa. I put it above all that. So I just wanted to say that right now. I just wanted to know what the sort of thought process was behind the making of that album, because when I listen to tracks as melancholy as Letting Go or How Can I Live, but then a tracks as like mesmerizing as sort of like Unframed or Numb, and then, you know, like This Time's For Real, which is just a full hard hitter, and Rebirth, I feel like that's just such a great dichotomy. What were the emotions that were sort of felt at that time? And do you maybe look at this material with a different perspective now than you did back then?
I do. At that time, I was writing about a lot of heartache. I had gone through a couple of relationships that, you know, went sour. At the time, I guess I felt like I really invested a lot of my heart into it. So during Confession, that was a lot of what was in my mind at that time. And it came from a resentful core. You know, it came from a place where I regretted that all this had happened. But having come from the first album, which also similarly had some topics like that reflected more towards the, you know, the freeing part of the mind, the letting resentment go. I think I tried to put some positive moments in Confession, but it was more towards the beginning of the record. I think there was a lot of positivity. We went into the studio with Bob Marlette, and then the record label heard the album and they didn't like the album. They felt it was too soft. And I had felt the same way the whole time. You know, I was like extremely concerned the whole time we were in the studio with Bob Marlette. And we were being pushed a certain way because What Comes Around had such huge success that they wanted us to have another #1 single. We had to have another #1 single. And I think it just drove the creative people in the band mad, you know? Like, it drove me mad. I was like, what do you mean we have to write like something? Like, to me, it didn't make sense. I had never written like that in my life. You either write a good song and people like it, or you write a mediocre song and some don't and some do, or you write a bad song and no one likes it.
I find it...
So, to me...
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. You were saying?
No, I'm listening.
Oh, no. I just find it really strange that they accuse you guys of being too soft. I heard a story from Jesse from Kill Switch Engage, and they were just signed to Roadrunner and taking off at the time that this came out. They gave them a Stained and a Creed record, being like, this is the more direction that we're sort of thinking of. So I'm just wondering why they thought you guys were going too soft, but at the same time they thought Kill Switch Engage was too hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think our first album, we were left alone. You know, Ron St. Germain produced the first album, just to put it out there again. I know on the record it says that someone else produced it, but that's a lie and a farce. Ron St. Germain produced the first album. It was mixed and co-produced a couple of songs by Eddie Wall, but nobody in the band produced the album. Nobody was the producer. But I think the label was really happy with the first album and the, you know, feedback it got from it. I think that what happens when money is involved, they start to think, well, what's the next step? And, you know, how do we brand this band within our label, but move the label forward in what we're doing? And we don't just want to be a metal label. That's why we're taking on bands that are crossing over. Yeah. And then you have these crossover bands, and then you're like, crossover more, you know? So it kind of does that, but but I'm not pointing a finger at the label either. I mean, at any point, the band could have said, "Hey, screw you! You don't know what you're saying. Just please leave us alone." And that's what wound up happening on Confession. When the label got the album back, they realized they screwed up. They put us in the studio with a producer who was great. I mean, there's nothing negative I can say about Bob Marlette. He's a great producer. We were just pointed in the wrong direction slightly, you know. And when the label got it back, they realized they were like, "Oh shit, we messed up."
Yeah.
And their response to that was, "Chris, Dave, we need you two back in the studio and write another half of the album so we can pick other songs to blend it in with this other songs." And that's what wound up happening. We went back in, and it was we did about a week and a half, 2 weeks with Bob Marlette. And then the angrier songs, the more like the more genuine inspiration came out. Yeah. You know, we weren't so like in the studio trying. You should try these things and try these. It was more like just do what you best. They put us in the studio with Dan Corniff, and Dan Corniff did a great job of technically remedying the album. Because the album wouldn't have come out the way it was going to be. At least I know I wasn't happy about it. The label wasn't happy about it. But it was done in 2 parts, you know? And that's usually how it winds up. It wound up at being a great album, but the label had pushed us slightly in the wrong direction at first, but we were very lucky they realized it.
Yeah.
Many other labels, perhaps a major label, would have said, "Oh, this is fine. This is just put it out, you know? Put it out. We've already spent money on it." But at least I know Mike Gitter and Monty at Roadrunner fought really hard for us to go back in the studio. And they felt like, no, these guys are leaving something out of this that we need to get in the album. And we need to put them in the studio on their own to just do whatever they want. And we'll get some more songs. And they figured that would fix the problem, and it did. Yep. So they were... You know, we were very lucky that they realized it and that they put a plan into effect and that the president of the label agreed to it. And, you know, or else, you know, I mean, for lack of a better word, I during the confession sessions, I used to say, "Look, man, I don't fucking want to be Sugar Ray." I remember like being like straight up, I don't fucking like those kind of songs, you know? And it was more and more like, no, they tried more ballads and more ballads. And it's like, look, I like ballads, but I'm not here to fucking like write Air Supply. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Like I said, man, though, that album, I just think the fact it shows the best of both worlds with your voice in a way. And again, and even the album before, like Revolution, you know, I With You is my favorite song on that album. That's like such a laid back song, but like again, I just think the lyricism that's on there, the aggression that's on you know, when it cuts and all this, like I just think it's just a fantastic album that I think is a Roadrunner classic, like just like the way Sepultura's Roots is a Roadrunner classic, or Iowa's a Roadrunner classic, End of Heartache. To me, this is like my ultimate Roadrunner classic. So
no, for sure, I agree with you. Yeah. And it wasn't one that got to be great because it was easy. You know, it was one that had to be rethought, and we had to realize mistakes that were made, and we were just lucky that Roadrunner was listening to us and willing to go along with realizing that it was just too soft at the moment.
Of course. And the final question I wanted to ask you is because I've always said that whether it is the New Lions at the Gate album, Hollywoody Sycamore, or your work with El Nino, all art has life in a way, and it grows and it develops and can even die sometimes. When you create something, do you want it to be more or less a representation of who you are at that particular time? Or do you think that maybe the art can grow with you and develop new meaning over time as more people interpret it and you perform it more and whatnot?
Well, definitely all art is capturing a moment in time. All art, and especially lyrics, is capturing, especially if you're writing about things you've experienced or witnessed, it's about somehow capturing that moment with words. But in hearing other people's interpretations, absolutely the art can change, you know? I usually don't like being blunt about what the song may be about, or exactly, you know, what the inspiration was. But, you know, I think that naturally the listener usually goes to the core of the meaning of the song naturally. And a lot of time, I've met fans at shows that the lyrics really have pulled them through a lot. And that's really the main reason why so many songwriters speak about personal experience, you know, to try to feel like you're not alone, like you're not the only one that has gone through this. And putting it on lyrics and getting it out, perhaps you find a group of people that you can connect with on that level. But it's definitely a captured moment in time, but the definition of what that moment meant can change drastically depending on people you may meet that take the song personally in a different way, or even through doing interviews and like you were asking questions like this, you realize things that you wouldn't have on your own. So there's that element. I think art is ever changing, and it's something. Music is just kind of like that beautiful thing that you can always find something new for the spirit in it. If you really enjoy it, and it's a song you really, really love, it will never be the same listening experience. You know, there will always be something new that you feel inside your heart somehow. But you also got to be in that moment. You know, we're also humans, and everybody's got their own life and stresses and problems, and it's not every time that you can put a great song on and be in that moment.
Yeah, of course.
You know, sometimes the mind still has you at your boss just cursed you out and told you, you know, be careful when you do this again, you're going to lose your job. And that could put you in a mood where you may want to listen to music and you may not. But you know, I think that the art of music is forever interpreting itself differently as you grow, as you get older, as your mind understands things differently. Because really that's what it is as we grow in our mind and our spirit, we understand things differently. And it usually takes the chemistry of another person to trigger, you know? Like what I said with a producer, to trigger a certain creative thing. And sometimes it's with a fan to trigger, wow, I didn't see it like that, but I could see how this can relate to what you've, you know, experienced. So it depends, but I think art is forever evolving. Even songs I like a lot, I listen to them now and I get different emotions out of them. And, you know, in my mind, I'll think of different things that I hadn't thought of before listening to the song. Yeah. But that's the beauty of music, you know, is that it is introspective and we all can listen independently and look inward and assess or change or not change. And I think it'd be tough to like enjoy a song, define it in your psychology as to what it is, where it came from, where it's going, and then forever not want to change that definition.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? Absolutely, man. And you know what? I always say that we're smarter than we were yesterday, but we're not as smart as we will be tomorrow. So, you know, it's just the way.
Absolutely.
That's the
all we could do, man, is just tomorrow try to be a little bit smarter than today. Yep. That's all you can do.
Every day is better than yesterday, but not as good as tomorrow. That's my motto of trying to stay motivated.
Oh, that's a good one, dude.
Thank you.
That's a good one.
Thank you, man. I heard that in House, the medical show. Of all places.
Right on.
Yep. So, before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time and for coming back on the show and, you know, for another fantastic interview. Is there just anything else with the release of this Lions at the Gate album that you would like to promote in terms of tours or what else we could be expecting? All I'm asking you is that with the excuses we cannot make, it left me wanting a lot more. So please tell me this isn't the last we'll hear of Lions at the Gate either.
Well, I'll start with this. We are really excited about the album. It's coming out in August. Please, everyone, pre-save it. If anyone listens to this and checks out one song and you like it, just pre-save it. It's not gonna. I don't think it'll cost you anything if you're already on a streaming platform. And I will let the fans that have been with us already and enjoying the music, because we started releasing singles like a year and a half, 2 years ago. So it's been little by little, we've been wanting people to digest it, even though the album was recorded and written 3 years ago. But I have good news that the album comes out on August 25th, but on August 26th, we're already in the studio to start writing our second album.
Hell yeah.
So that'll be some good news that you can get exclusively right here on Heavy and Wild.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that. You hear that, Blabbermouth? Thank you so much, Chris. Everybody.
And in the band, we're super stoked about it. We're already like, the other day we all sat down and what do we want to do? Because we're excited about the album, but we don't want to lose momentum. And we realize that we're very, very lucky to have a very small team of people that we have that believe in us. And that we're very, very lucky to have a small fan base that we have that believe in us. And we got to just keep going.
Yeah.
We can't lose the momentum. And people that really believe in us have put a lot of faith and effort and have helped us invest. And we don't want to let them down. We don't want to let the fans down. So we're just going to keep working hard. I have a feeling the second album is going to be even better because we went into the first one, with very simple expectations. And I think if we go into the second album with the same very simple expectations, but now with a more knowledgeable, creative mind as to what we should do as a band, without confining ourselves, I think we should be able to pull off something really fun.
I know you will. I know you will, because everything you've put out for the last 20 plus years has always surprised me. So I know it'll work out great. But thank you so much, everybody. Cristian Machado of Lions at the Gate. Be sure to check out their brand new album, The Excuses We Cannot Make. It is finally coming out very soon, and new stuff coming out very soon as well. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York.